This is the Sabbath School lesson for the second quarter, 2021.
Lesson 11 for June 5 to 11, New Covenant Sanctuary, read by Dr. Percy Harrold. Monday, June 7, Sin, Sacrifice and Acceptance. Our text for today is Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 22, and according to the law almost all things are purified with blood, and without shedding of blood there is no remission. The divinely appointed way for the Old Testament sinners to rid themselves of sin and guilt was through animal sacrifices. The Israelite sacrificial offerings are detailed in Leviticus chapter 1 through to chapter 7. Careful attention was paid to the use and disposal of the blood in the various kinds of sacrifices. Indeed, the role of blood in sacrificial rituals is one of the unifying features in the Israelite sacrifices. The person who had sinned, and thus had broken the covenant relationship and the law that regulated it, could be restored to full fellowship with God and humanity by bringing an animal sacrifice as a substitute. Sacrifices with their rites were the God-appointed means to bring about cleansing from sin and guilt. They were instituted to cleanse the sinner, transferring the individual sin and guilt to the sanctuary by sprinkling blood and reinstituting communion and full covenantal fellowship of the penitent with the personal God who is the saving Lord. How do these concepts, expressed above, help us to understand the questions at the end of yesterday's study? What prophetic significance was there in the animal sacrifice? Well, Isaiah 53 verses 4 to 7 gives us some clues. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who will declare his generation? For he was cut off from the land of the living, for the transgressions of my people he was stricken. And they made his grave with the wicked, but with the rich at his death, because he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He has put him to grief. When you make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed. He shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. He shall see the labour of his soul and be satisfied. By his knowledge my righteous servant shall justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore I will divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. And then in Hebrews 10 verse 4, for it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats could take away sins. The Old Testament animal sacrifices were the divinely ordained means for ridding the sinner of sin and guilt. They changed the sinner's status from that of guilty and worthy of death to that of forgiven and re-established in the covenantal God-human relationship. But there was a sense in which the animal sacrifices were prophetic in nature. After all, no animal was an adequate substitute in atoning for humanity's sin and guilt. Paul states it in his own language. It is impossible that the blood of bulls and goats should take away sins. Thus, an animal sacrifice was meant to foreshadow the coming of the divine human servant of God, who would die a substitutionary death for the sins of the world. It is through this process that the sinner is forgiven and accepted by the Lord, and the basis of the covenant relationship is established. And so, to finish today, put yourself in the position of someone who lived in Old Testament times when animals were sacrificed at the sanctuary, remembering too just how important livestock were to their economy, culture, and whole way of life. What lesson were their sacrifices supposed to teach them about the cost of sin? This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. It's supported by the Sabbath School Department and Hope Channel Australia, and is rebroadcast by Christian Record Services and through podcasts at It Is Written in the United States, Hope Channel Germany, and through Apple iTunes and SoundCloud. Remember, God is always faithful.